reboot's also not a bad idea.
Oh, that's interesting.
Live stream. How many people are watching?
I don't know.
Two.
Oh,
Should we
already
watch
two
two to
people?
get our numbers up? Should we open up a separate browser?
It depends. It depends if it messes with the bandwidth. I try not to watch it
In
anywhere
my
because
case,
flexing the internet.
ooh, background music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to minimize the amount of cat behind that y'all get. It's down. I set the camera height at a height where it's probably a little bit low, but where it was like more human height, so I could occasionally make eye contact with y'all. Unfortunately, that's also at cattail height. I later discovered.
I mean, it's okay. Occasional cat is always fun.
It's become an internet tradition since COVID. I find there being value in people interacting with their pets online.
Yeah, people are awesome. It's like when
you see how they treat their pets when they're not really paying attention to what other people are, that they're seeing. Like if somebody hits their dog, you're just like,
oh my God. Did that actually happen? I have never seen anyone treat their animals badly on a live stream.
I haven't seen it on a live stream. I've seen it in person.
Ah, okay. Interesting. People and
a drunk friend of mine.
Shout out.
Shout out.
Yes.
Shout out to my. Wow, I hadn't thought about that. Hey, long time.
It was a different friend, like all your drunk friends are being triggered at the moment. But you're like, Prima Aprilis, Bob.
most of my friends would know exactly who I was talking about.
They're messaging
but I will not say
now.
the name. I'll not say. I mean, it wasn't a major problem. It was just like a one-time thing, and it was just it was like, oh. Like that person had that in them. It was a surprise.
I really like that music. Like guitar, amazing. Back vocals.
Do you suppose that's a real photo that you're in front of? Nerdalium?
Like volume.
It's so good to put people to sleep. No, it's not.
I mean, there's a lot going on in that photo. Like major, I guess that's lightning. Yeah, major lightning, major lava.
I will disappear so you can marvel at stable diffusion's creation.
Oh, this was our AI friends.
Yes.
Yes.
And look, like we all have like little curtain. Mine is made out of matches. It has like a broken animal in it and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I'm like just like doing that. Magic. Hashtag MacGyver fans.
How does that make you disappear?
I
cover the camera, and what stays is the photograph.
Oh.
Whatever background.
So there's an automatic face detection that keeps faces and replaces background. So if you remove the face, it only keeps background.
When I started with computer vision, that was hard to do. Like just say blur my background and have it isolate your front image so well without any green screening. Yeah, we didn't have the compute power for that kind of thing. Now it's like, whatever. Oink.
The Zoom does it better than a lot of other applications.
Yeah, somebody worked on that algorithm.
Proprietary AI.
I feel like it makes me pop, but
It's really nice, but you have an excellent background actually.
I don't know which of those is better. I mean, one is you get more fluffy background pieces. I actually thought the other day, and we're planning on doing this, I'm gonna level that photo, that frame behind me.
Oh,
So it's actually level, but I mean level it to the frame where the camera is, the angle of the camera, just to mess with people. Because it'll screw with people's perspective. It is a little bit unlevel based on the rock to the thing.
Are those rocks, devil? Like,
Yeah, I bet they are. Because it's part of a fireplace. If you don't build level like that, you get yourself in trouble because it doesn't go vertical and center of gravity is screwed up. So I think and it was somebody who knew what they were doing, not me. But they're actually stone.
should we finish the song or should we fade it out?
I can fade it, huh? Okay.
I'm gonna fade in Graham.
Yeah. Graham, are you with us? I heard
I'm
Graham.
with you.
Yes.
It's like a Ouija board. Are you with us?
I had the picture up there. I think I need to log in to Zoom in order to get the picture up, but
It's
I'll do
okay.
it next time.
Next time. It's you are with us like the voice of reason.
Yeah, I don't know if it goes that far, Kara. At least this
It's a
about
lot of pressure.
It's like, voice of reason by comparison. Sorry.
As long as you don't expect it to be the right reason, that's fine. I'll give you a reason.
Okay. Welcome to Nonviolent Communication live streams. And today we are discussing chapter 10, Expressing Anger Fully. My speakers are Nerdalian Plebs. There. I think there. Yeah. There is Nerdalian Plebs. And Ouija board, and Algernon. And
Ouija board,
also
Algernon.
the voice of Graham Pong.
Greetings, all.
Hi.
I will start the image of theory. Made a bunch of flashcards on the background behind me. So, expressing anger fully, killing, hitting, blaming, hurting others, whether physically or mentally, are superficial expressions of what is going on with us when we are angry. NVC, however, does not encourage us to use what? To ignore, squash, or swallow anger, but to express the core of our anger fully and wholeheartedly.
I really
Sounds
like it.
amazing.
It's taken all the way to chapter 10 for you to like really enthusiastically read your own slide.
That's because I'm angry.
I won't say anything about
That's
building
quite
anger
funny.
for Rosenberg here. No.
Exactly.
Something that occurred to me is apparently Rosenberg both thinks it's possible for us to hurt others mentally, but it's not possible for others to be the cause of our pain. It seems like a bit of a double standard here.
I saw that. I felt that too. I saw that and felt that too. The idea where it says in the first part, like, whether causing mental pain, and you're like, the other person's skill at receiving, let's say, their qualia, is going to determine how much pain they feel, and then that's the point of the whole anger chapter, is to, look at what you're actually angry about. So when it said causing pain in others, I was like, all right. Then that was part of the superficial description. But it seems odd.
Yeah. I think it's one of those cases where Rosenberg is pointing towards something that's not very stupid, but his writing's letting him down a little bit. So pointing out that often what we want by expressing our anger in violent ways, we can get better by communicating in wiser ways, serving ourselves by expressing our anger in some ways, and we could more deeply serve ourselves by expressing our anger in other ways, which is often true. But yeah.
Yeah, my take on it is that Rosenberg is once again restricting himself to a very limited range where the other person has dedicated to the NVC communication style.
Mm.
Because on the other hand, I've met people where just telling them they're not perfect hurts them. And you can't express anger or frustration to somebody who, by expressing the anger or frustration to them, they're getting hurt under Rosenberg's rules. So I'm just saying, it's, you have to recognize when NVC is applicable or when it's outside of Rosenberg's parameters that he's establishing as a preconceived idea for when it's happening. That was part of what I was taking out of it. Tag.
You changed slides on us, didn't you?
Yes, because like those two kind of combined together, they a little bit enlighten us of where he's coming from. The other one was like there's like a bunch of slogans somehow.
Yeah.
So basically, he points out to us that our anger is not caused by whatever other people do, but our anger is caused by us not connecting with whatever we actually want, need, and that desire to blame other people for what we are not receiving. And so that one is interesting because he actually gives an answer that kind of stood out to me, because he says, we are not angry because of what others say or do. And thinking like that is encouraged by the culture or like upbringing that used guilt as a means of controlling people, tricking people into thinking, for example, you brought a bad grade that made mommy feel very bad, like as if the child actually is like direct cause of mommy feeling bad. And so the child growing up like that thinking, oh, so other people can make others feel bad, and he goes to a colleague, same child, like basically, oh, you did not laugh at my joke, you made me feel bad. And it keeps going, and every day it keeps strengthening always. And so it tricks people into thinking that others can make others feel that way. But like the way he uses this language, tricks, it feels natural somehow. It doesn't feel like a trick, yeah?
I was going to say that I agree that there is a trick or a disconnect there. Like it's not a straightforward connection, but trick kind of has the connotation that you intend to trick someone, or at least it feels that way. But I suspect that a lot of people kind of wield these weapons just because they're echoing patterns that they see other people do that. Like you, if you misgendered me and didn't respect my pronouns, do I get angry that you did that? Where's that expectation? Where's the responsibility for that anger of not using someone's pronouns? That strikes me as being in the same category here of having an expectation about what the other person has to do as opposed to being responsible for your own feelings. Like, you hurt me by not using my pronouns is the same sentence.
Well, you're touching on the outrage culture. So everything in media is not encouraging this type of thinking. but encouraging the type of thinking, oh, the other people did something bad to us, and therefore I am okay to go and like cry in front of everybody and say, they did this to me. And
they caused my pain. They hurt
pain.
me. Right.
I mean, to me,
So-
mhm. No,
No,
Mikey,
go ahead. I was going to say that I think we're in agreement with how he's framing
Mhm.
this for nonviolent communication, and I suspect that he would say that that outrage culture is not at all aligned with NVC.
It's not like, but don't you guys think he's maybe going too far the other way? It's one thing to call out people who are playing victim for strategic political reasons, and doing so in ways that don't really make sense, but they're gaining from it, so that's why they're doing it, not because it makes sense. And going so far as basically to claim, no, emotional abuse is impossible because you can't cause anyone to feel anything, and also like spiritual care is impossible because you can't cause anyone to feel good. You can, like, nobody can causally interact with people's feelings at all. Like, we're all just these silos who in ourselves cause ourselves to feel things, and it's purely illusion that anyone else ever has any causal effect on how we're doing inside. That seems too far.
That feels to me like the Buddha level. Like if you can live in that world where you can be that insulated from everything, that might be some ideal to strive at. But this is not the field. Even people who are trying to practice NVC aren't going to get it all the time. And then people who have no idea are going to be, you can be interacting with them. They have no idea. They're not even aware that they're doing a lot of this. So you're going to say something to them. They're going to feel hurt. They're going to respond that way.
Also, people can take drugs to make them emotionally unresponsive to the world. So they could just be permanently in a pretty good mood, but they never get sad about anything. They never get scared about anything. They never get angry about anything. Like, is it possible to have a meaningful human relationship with such a person who's just emotionally completely detached from anything we do?
Yeah, it seems inhuman, really. If you don't have those contrasts in your life. Not to say that you should try to get angry, but I agree. If you had a completely flat affect, if you had a pill that you could take that just, you're like, whatever, to everything, that's not very human. And I don't think you're going to bond, you're not going to connect to people very closely that way.
Yeah, I was going to chime in here where I think Rosenberg goes astray from my autistic take is he's basically smashing together the emotional blame and shame level with the cause and effect, basically just raw, like physical, raw objective reality level. And by doing so, he's throwing things out like commitments. It's like if somebody doesn't give you your paycheck on Friday, are you angry because they didn't do something, or is that entirely within you? I have to sit there and say, no, I'm angry because there was a commitment. I had this expectation for it happening, and I'm getting angry because the expectation wasn't met. And it's a case of the other person established the expectation beforehand and then fulfilled to hit the expectation they set. And in the cases that Rosenberg is specifically calling out as wrong, it's a case where that wasn't the expectation set ahead of time. So therefore, the person's like projecting this anger onto a blank slate sort of thing. I'm angry because you did this thing that, I didn't, you didn't know you were supposed to do. Now, when it comes down to the case of like the child bringing home the grades, now you're kind of in a middle range where it's tough to sit there and say. It depends on how much, the kid, I can see some circumstances that could push it on either side of that category, where some of that anger might be legitimate, caused by the kid, like they lied to the parent multiple times or things like that. Or it could be entirely the parent projecting onto the kid. It's just one of those, I think if you separate the emotional level from the factual level, it can go a little bit easier tagging on that.
Well, I want to pick up your example of the just the case of not getting your paycheck. where you might be really upset by that. And then suppose you go into the payroll department because it's a small company and you're like, what's going on? Like, why didn't I get my check? And you're angry and whatever. And they're like, have you noticed the power's out? And you're like, power's out. They're like, yeah, power's out. Computers aren't working. We're not running the checks. Like, we'll run them as soon as we can. And then you'd suddenly be like, oh, yeah, right. Okay, well, yeah, I didn't know that the power was out. I mean, that's reasonable. So now you like your entire I'm angry just has to get diffused because you have this new information. And that kind of implies that the anger was in you because the circumstances really didn't change. You might not have been aware of them, but like your framing of it, you brought the anger to that situation. And it was, that would be one where it's fully in your court.
And my analysis of that is the anger wasn't the problem in your scenario. It was the transmission as to how that emotion translated into action. Because you can be just as angry going down into that one and saying, what's up? Normally there, and that's what I'm saying. It depends on how you're translating the emotion into action.
I was thinking of his example where, if your framing is those people in payroll are absolutely idiots and they have messed us up before, and oh my God, I cannot believe I did not get my paycheck again, whatever, you have this giant story in your head. And you're sort of acting through that lens. And so like he had used that in one of his examples where the framing of when he got punched in the nose completely shifted depending on who punched him in the nose or get hit in the nose. So anyway, so just the fact that something can change by situationally, like how you're framing it.
Yeah, I remember that example. Another one. A lady was late, and there could have been two different reactions. And one of them was she was late because she doesn't respect me, or the other one, she's late, oh my God, I can rest for half an hour. That's so nice. It's like those needs inside, you can connect them. It's connected to what you are thinking about another person. It like kind of shows that also like this motivation a little bit. Like sometimes we will make different judgments for ourselves depending what we think about another person. So that one was interesting to me.
So let's think of an example where a person has needs that they can meet by being a complete douchebag to a bunch of people.
Okay.
Upset a whole bunch of people, like a whole office of people, really upset that their needs are being violated. So they have needs. Their needs are being violated by one person who, when they sincerely look inside, they care about their needs and just don't care about the other people's needs. Yeah. Just not faced. Yeah.
Okay. And so where are you going with this?
Where I'm going with this is then asking, is it legit for that person to say, no, me violating your needs isn't what's hurting your feelings. You all framing my hurt being a douchebag is what's hurting your feelings. So don't come to me, ask me to change what I'm doing. You get over it. Like whatever. Yeah, I'm the boss here. I get to do what I want. Your feelings, your problems.
Again, we get into the problem of like, if everybody were trying to do NVC and you had that as a base field, you could have some flexibility to make claims and say, hey, are we following this? But if you're working with people who aren't, coming at them and saying, it's your responsibility how you feel about these things, probably not going to go that well. And I don't know about this needs thing.
He seems
it's too flexible. Yeah. Like I have a
he does use it as
angry,
use it as a catch-all for like wants and desires and aspirations and goals. And
because like for your example, supposing you had a legitimately horrible day, you're the boss, and a bunch of bad stuff happened before you got to work. I don't know, your wife said she's divorcing you or something, and you're like, oh my God. Anyway, you're really angry and upset and frustrated, whatever, and you just have a whole lot of, and then you get into work and you start tearing into people. You feel like, oh, this is what I needed. I really needed a vent. I just needed a vent. So, this is going to be a complete ass all day. That are your legitimate needs, but it's not appropriate to spread that around.
I was going to say, Rosenberg seems to be on a mission here to reduce violence in the world. Like if he can play this game where he says, like, other people aren't responsible for our pain, can't he just say, well, by that logic, violence is impossible? So, mission accomplished.
Impossible. No, I mean, I think his primary goal is to, give people other tools aside from violence. And we're more in the space of like which verbal things are going to be violent or not. Nodalian is frozen on my screen, but it's a nice
such a
pose.
beautiful smile.
Sometimes you get frozen in a bad way, but this is not too bad.
I can make a print screen for the shot.
Yeah, lightning bolt coming out of your head. It's nice.
It's funny.
There you go.
Magic. Reminds me of Eric Cartman using his photograph for the online classes. Okay.
But so I think like from the space of your own anger and seeing how you're reacting and seeing the stimulus, and then you're like, I'm angry, and then separating the thing that caused your anger to rise from, what that is rooted in and what the bigger context, I think, is Rosenberg's point here, is to try to create a separation there, especially for people who have tendencies toward physical violence. And that gives them, more degrees of flexibility than just escalating to the ultimate violent path.
So he gets then,
go ahead.
yeah.
No.
Graham, I wanted
Yeah.
to ask Graham for a take-in.
He's muted. You can't mute yourself, Graham.
Sorry. No, I was going to sit there and say I kind of agree with both you and Nodalian, where I think there are times when you do need to focus on yourself, especially people who are prone to that, thought to violent action without really much cognition going in between. And Rosenberg is definitely giving them some definite mechanics and tools that they could use on that one. On the other hand, like Nodalian's pointing out, in situations where you're not dealing with people who are committed to NVC, following NVC can leave people very vulnerable to be preyed on from narcissists. It's basically just leaves them wide open, and they keep going back to the narcissist and basically pointing out all their weaknesses that are hurting him, which is exactly what the narcissist is going to turn around and weaponize against them. And it's, again, if Rosenberg had some filter to say when you should use it and when you shouldn't, I think he'd have a much stronger argument. And to me, that comes down to when it has the cause and effect, because like with the paycheck, some of the reasons you're angry is you're not going to be able to make your rent. You're not going to be able to buy food. And that's more of the cause and effect thing. And for me, that falls into what I would call a righteous anger, where it has a logical, factual impact that you can't escape. And that's kind of causing the anger, as opposed to just, something a little much more ephemeral. Going to tag on those concepts.
You're right. It was the criticism of Rosenberg that his approach is too general, doesn't take into account the individuals. Basically, like, not everybody can be brushed with the same brush. That's it. Not every situation fits to nonviolent communication. It's an aspiration, let's say.
Yeah.
It's like one of the frames.
He may have covered it earlier before I got here, but does he talk about like when to disengage, or like when it's worthwhile to go after, trying to apply NVC, and then when to just go maybe not. Because
I
we might
think
draw a
he'll-
line in there
he'll-
somewhere. Like if
he'll-
you encounter the narcissist who is abusing you, but I don't know if he's really
Yeah.
covering that.
So the next chapter is the protective use of force. So where I strongly suspect he's going to temper some of the things and qualify some of the things he said in earlier chapters. But I also think this may just be not very well thought out writing on his part. So I have some quotes that I jotted down. He says, "We are never angry because of what someone else did."
Yeah.
And he also writes, "All violence is the result of people tricking themselves
Right.
into believing that their pain derives from other people and that consequently those people deserve to be punished." So I can buy that some or even a lot of cases for that, but I learned very early in my university training that statements for all X, it is such that something else, you find one counterexample and you prove that wrong. And so like really easy to prove wrong and very difficult to make such strong claims or prove them right. So I think he does that more or less for emotional emphasis, less than from a logical point. He's a psychologist. He knows how to talk to people in ways that have emotional impact. And I don't think he's thinking about like how a mathematician like parse that sentence. Oh, like, so you're saying like really never. So if I find one example where it is the case,
right,
I've proven you wrong, and like all of this is out of the window.
Right. But if you take it at the level, I'm with you. If you take it at the level of saying he said all, but if I came up with an exception, he would probably go, oh yeah, well, not, I'm sure there are some other things, but that wasn't my point. And you're like, all right, maybe I'm just over parsing what you're saying. But the idea that, a lot of that comes from that, I balk the same way when I'm reading those things where they say all or never, and then I'll reread it and say, disassemble that pretty quickly.
My take on what you're talking about, Nodalik, is you're making that categorical error of trying to apply logic to emotion. And that is just, logic doesn't apply to emotion. And that's, I think Rosenberg runs, you are able to sort the two. I think Rosenberg has some challenges. And one of the criticisms I think you're having is you expect somebody who's a scientist, which is what a psychologist is, to be writing at a little more precise level than what you're getting from Rosenberg on things like for logic or the all or none sort of thing.
To be clear, I don't think Rosenberg is a scientist.
I was going to challenge that too. Not
Rosenberg.
I was going to do psychologist and scientist, but
that's a little more complicated. I would say there are some psychologists who are also scientists.
There you go. I could get behind that.
That's way easier to defend.
It's great. It's easy to agree with the partial.
No psychologist who have ever lived have been scientists is a very difficult one to defend, and all psychologists who have ever lived have been scientists is also quite difficult. Some are, some aren't.
If I have to compare somebody who has a degree in physics and somebody who has a degree in psychology, and which of those is, quote, the harder science, not more difficult, but more tangible and based in logic and step-by-step provability, reproducibility, ... Psychology is not going to win.
It's a tangent, though. I'm very tempted to continue down this tangent, but
let's not go down. It would make us angry.
Yeah, I just wanted to shut out all scientists, psychologists. I wanted to ask a challenging questions. Are all scientists scientists as well? Like just
oh man, we could have a whole talk.
With the arguments.
I feel we need to get back to Rosenberg, though.
Yes.
The need, yes. So here are some of the quotes that he kind of highlighted. The cause of anger might be in our thinking in thoughts of blame and judgment. And the other one, anger is a result of thinking that is disconnected from our needs. He will, of course, elaborate on that further. So there are two causes of anger he gives. I changed because I have anticipated the comment from Nerdalian. Originally, it was the cause of anger is in our thinking in thoughts of blame and judgment. I have changed that just for that reason. And then anger is a result of thinking that's disconnected from needs. That one I didn't change. Like those, I remember him criticizing others a little bit for saying kind of refraining from blank statements that affirm what is, because again, not everything is like that. There are nuances to everything. There are also different way of thinking and building the opinion in our head, like different steps are taken. So that's why I have changed it to might be in our thinking. It's also plain. Because there are other causes of anger. Although
I'm curious though, just trying to use his language there, and looking at my own angers and thinking, how do I frame it such that it's about the disconnection from my needs? And this is something I'm not super familiar with trying to do. And it feels like an awkward fit for a number of cases. Just frustration, say, I guess my need is that I wanted it to be a certain way. And then the frustration is it's not that way. No, disconnection.
I think it's
something not quite.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit clearer when you take into consideration the kinds of examples he gives of angry thoughts. So the kinds of mental events that he considers to be examples of anger. They're the kinds of thoughts that are essentially blaming and insulting and shaming other people for doing and being bad. And so those are angry thoughts. Presumably, I would think the kinds of frustrating thoughts that we have are like of a wholly different kind of mental event. Whereas I think someone like Panksepp would say, no, they're just shades of the same thing, really. So I'm inclined to lean more to Panksepp's side of it. But yeah, so I think he's cordoning off the meaning of anger as being the kinds of thoughts that's pointed outwards at bad things in the world. And he's saying that's what anger is, and that's when you're thinking those thoughts about other people doing bad or other people being bad, you're not thinking about which of your needs are not being met, and you're not thinking about the needs from which they're acting. You're thinking these kinds of thoughts. You terrible people, like what a terrible narcissist you are. How could you, you don't care, you don't respect me. You're thinking those kinds of thoughts are not thoughts that are connected to I need to feel cared for, and I'm not feeling cared for. Which he would say that's not an angry thought, that's a compassionate thought. Even though I think those thoughts can be had in an affective state of rage, according so the way Panksepp defines it. So I actually think we can have different semantic events correspond with different affective states, and the semantic content of the event doesn't, for me, define the emotion. But that's quite a theoretical distinction that not a lot of neuroscientists are on board with. So there's a bit of a debate in neuroscience about whether the emotions are the semantic content or whether affect is something subcortical that can be filled with different kinds of semantic content. That got really technical.
There's a lot there.
And here I was going to go technical in a different direction.
Oh boy.
And that's sort of the I'm not sure how Rosenberg totally disconnects anger from need.
From
because
which?
I see them in what's that?
Anger from
needs. Because I see them inherently linked on an intuitive level. I understand his problems about discussing the issues of thoughts concerning the relationship of the two. But on an intuitive level, I see that anger is pretty much caused by needs that aren't met. It's like pain is a need that's not met. An expectation is not met, and you get pain when it's not met, and the anger is a result of the emotion of that not being met. And that's like the intuitive flow, the unconscious flow. And it's a question of what Rosenberg's talking about is the reason why you had that need in the first place, and how you can think about it and how you can handle that unconscious flow underneath once you have that anger. And then that's what he's talking about, is how to align pretty much the intuitive side, the unconscious side, and the conscious side, and bring them into alignment. It's kind of what I'm seeing that Rosenberg's trying to strive for, even if that's not explicit in what he's saying there. And he needs to basically source where the needs are in order to diffuse the anger, is what I'm seeing in the thought one. Where if you think about it, then you can sit there and realize where the source of the anger is and sort of diffuse everything. I'm going to tag and see if that made any sense to anybody else.
It does. It's sort of deconstruction of anger as it comes, as it arises. But then, like, if you will redirect the blaming part of anger into, okay, let me remove that because it focuses too much of my attention. Let me check out for other check marks that the anger might apply. And it does diffuse the situation, because that whatever this pendulum that started, it starts swinging in a different direction. It's like comes down. I see where it lands, tagging out.
Maybe just before we move on, I want to add, like, I think Rosenberg gets close to saying that. I think that's why he says anger is like those other kinds of response to anger are superficial. So I think he's also trying to point out that there's this deeper source of anger, and he also says that anger is like a wake-up call to this deeper issue. And if we can stop doing the superficial thing that's often disconnected from the true source, and if we can connect to the true source of like the needs that aren't being met, we can have a conversation about that without blaming and judging, or having a shouting contest or whatever. We can make mutual empathy so we can understand each other and be cooperative and compassionate together. And yeah, besides for the theoretical claims of for all and never and all that, I think the practical half of the chapter is pretty good. So the kinds of tips of how to proceed practically, I think there's a lot more value in that section of the chapter than his musings on the impossibility of causing other people emotions.
Yeah, like he gives a lot of exercises in that chapter, like basically like different frames of looking at your anger so that you can express it fully, which is like, I mean, like I would call that chapter "Please diffuse your anger," but yeah.
So I haven't got, is it diffuse is different from expressing? I mean,
Yeah,
they
like
really feel quite different. And his early on, and what you just said, like his fully express your anger, that feels to me like you are surely going to induce a lot of feelings in anybody who's watching that, if you fully express them.
Like a clickbait chapter. And then you read, oh, that's not what it suggests. It's like, and then he's like,
I mean, I guess you can, so this is the thing, like you can fully connect to those emotions, and you can maybe question where these are coming from and understand what you're needing and missing and all that, but not express it. Like express it in the sense of consider it, but not outwardly then express it. So maybe again, there's a little imprecision in the word, or I'm not sure what the disconnect is there. You could ask him.
He died. RP.
We'll bring him back by GPT.
We already have the voice of Pong. Sorry, don't get angry. Now I feel uncomfortable. I will sit with that.
Don't be angry.
Oof, I'm so relieved you laughed. When we judge others, we contribute to violence in the world. Use anger as a wake-up call. Yes, you called it. Nerdalente. I mean, like the confusion is here because like at the Zoom call, Nerdali is on the other side. So I keep getting confused, and I'm remembering where he's positioned at the YouTube.
I don't know if that's right for anybody, but it works for me.
I don't have to remember. It's really easy. I'm not.
Oh, there you go. Self-referential.
Like with all the dramatic effect of lightning.
Buckaroo Banzai, no matter where you go, there you are.
Yeah. At the core of all anger is a need that it's not being met. Yes. So basically, if your need is not to contribute to the world violence and you're angry, this need is not being met by your anger. I mean, kind of.
I mean, it feels like an interesting question to explore, but I don't know if, like, my surface level of it is I don't know that I would put all anger in that category. That it is all derived from a perceived lack, I guess, is how I would put need. Again, need feels just like a wild card here. You can just declare
definition smuggling.
He may have narrowed it at some point. I don't know. But it's a general word. It's broad because it's a self-declared thing that flexes over time.
Yeah,
well, you almost have to define it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, I did say it earlier, like he uses it as a catch-all, and in different literatures they use different terms as a catch-all because it's just like really annoying to keep listing sort of needs, requirements, wants, desires, objectives, aspirations. Like to list all of them all of the time is exhausting, and they're subtly different, and the differences, for the sake of the points he's making, not so important. So, but the term I'd prefer over needs, because I think I was raised that needs are things without which you die. It's like really important, very critical things. So I don't like the term need so much as a catch-all, but interest seems to do fairly well. That's in interest-based negotiation. They talk about interests also in this kind of catch-all way where functional requirements, needs, desires, objectives, criteria, evaluative criteria, whatever. I also like criteria. Unmet all values. So interest, criteria, values, I like better than needs. But I think he's using needs in that kind of abstract sense, where it's not necessarily this like life critical thing. And also, he does in the beginning of the book deny the possibility that people can have an intrinsic need to commit violence. Like at the core of human nature, he says the only needs we have are to promote life and to be loving and kind and whatever. That's true nature, and all violence is just the result of a mistake with like us, like delusions and illusions. People mistakenly, maladaptively pursuing needs that aren't violence. So again, one example of a person acting out of an intrinsic need to commit violence. Go ahead and prove that wrong.
I want to rephrase that.
Say that the person who goes around and tries to commit violence has a need for something else. Hence the conversation about guys who started the fighting club for the need of being touched.
Touched?
Yes, by another human being. So they went into elaborate way. They could not admit to each other that they just like a human connection and touch. So they started a fighting club to look manly because it's bad, not to just to admit those things. It's a sign of weakness. But what if, guys, let's start a fighting club and beat each other? Yeah, that sounds amazing. And they just go, all of them went with it because the movie with Edward Norton and
Fight Club,
Fight Club. Yeah.
outstanding movie. And
Brad
book.
Pitt, yes. And Helena
Do you know
Bonham
that book
Carter.
is often prohibited in prisons?
It's another book that we read out loud on Twitch streams. Like Flowers
yeah?
for Algernon and Fight Club, we actually read it. It's an excellent book.
So-
Actually, a lot of good kind of moralizing conversation.
I don't know in the case of Fight Club that they're fighting, to say that is in need of touch. I don't think fits with that movie very well. Like, to me, that the need there was a need for like a no bullshit, absolutely authentic moment in life where you just like, boom, you're giving a punch or you're taking a punch, and I just need to feel something that's not ridiculously fake. Something along those lines was something about Fight Club, where people needing to just be absolutely real in the moment, and and then also vent their anger and fighting. But there's something about it being super authentic. I mean, that was it's the character's struggle with his IKEA apartment.
Yeah, all of the IKEA apartments, amazing. Like I really like how in every city he has the same apartment. It's the same furniture, just blending in together. Yeah, shut out.
I was just
all the
starting to
Fighting
buy
Club
stuff like
members.
that when I watched that movie. I think it shifted my course.
Oh,
No, it's a good thing.
as long as you don't get an inspiration of like beating yourself in your boss's office.
No, and I haven't.
That was
I
the best.
haven't started to make soap or anything like that either.
That
I was
moment
gonna
when they
say,
started.
The good aspect about Fight Club that hasn't been mentioned that I thought was they were going for is that sense of hierarchy. And
Hierarchy?
they were using that to measure themselves against each other. Two men walk in, one wins, one loses.
Oh, I
And
see.
thereby establish. And it's sort of like that male hierarchy testing against each other. There's the competition versus like in the workplace and everybody else has been extracted for more of just cooperation. And it's like violence is almost the ultimate competition. And that's what they were reducing. That was, again, you gave lots of messages out of movies. I agree with the one you got, that you extracted, Algernon. I'm just saying this was a different one that
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because
and
when you're done, where you're like you've been measured, and you know where you stand in that tribe. And it might be all right. You're just like, I'm not the strongest, but I was in there. Like, I did my bit, and I know exactly where I stand.
And you're a member of the tribe. You're now included. That's your right of admission by going through the rite of passage. To get admitted is to get either beat the crap out of somebody or get it beat out of you. Another thing I think Rosenberg is good that he's doing there is he's trying to refocus the mind from attributing the lack of a need to an outside person to the need itself. And I think that if he definitely allows the next step of saying a person can be part of that need not being met, then he can complete a more healthy cycle. Because then you have other people's actions and responsibilities and commitments can come into play on the need not being met there, as opposed to the straight attribution without going through the need structure first. At least that makes sense and tries to rehabilitate Rosenberg some for me. Tag.
I like it. I see a lot of practical use in it as well. Instead of focusing on the feeling of anger, you kind of pull back and like, what exactly do I need? And if the anger arisen, like if you throw away the judgment of another person, what exactly the need that was not met, and how can I get there? Like kind of making a plan, which is instead of making a plan, how can I punish those who did not help me to get a thing? How can I get a thing? If it makes sense. So instead of thinking about punishing people who are responsible for you not getting what you want, you will take that as information. Okay, they will not help me to get what I want. How can I get what I want in a different way? I get it.
That's
The need
interesting because
itself.
your goal gets redirected, and I think he explicitly says this in the text, that the energy that you would put into that anger, if you can redirect that into, looking at what is, I say framing, I don't know if he says that, but looking into the framing and the context, and why do I feel this way, and I don't feel any agency, or I don't feel I'm being listened to, or I'm not being respected, and then you just have all these different aspects. If your energy is just going into, I have to get back at them, as opposed to your real goal, which was, I think in the example with the prison thing, they weren't hearing his request or something. So if it just became about him getting vengeance, that would be misdirected, or fighting, I guess.
Yeah, so I'd like to jump in here and say that I think a lot of the benefit there is actually realizing that at any given moment, we have many different needs simultaneously alive in us. And by exclusively focusing on just like vengeance or retribution or things along those lines that would give us some kind of pleasure at causing someone else pain, even though that's supposed to be impossible, can help us make better decisions if we take more things into consideration. But I do think there's enough psychology to show that like a significant percentage of people, if not all people, are at times intrinsically motivated to pursue something like retribution or vengeance, and they derive pleasure from it. So I think that's a need as much as our need to be accepted and our need to be heard. We have a need for justice. We derive pleasure from it. And so at least for people who have that kind of need, the question is that a need that needs to be rehabilitated out of them, or is that a need that has evolved for functional reasons? And I think it's the latter, because I think that evolved because there are also people who, not everybody feels a strong need for retribution and vengeance. Not everybody feels a strong need for reciprocity or for giving care for others. And so if you have a society of just people who feel the need to take care of everyone's needs, and there's a tiny subset of people who don't share that need, they just have a need to exploit for their own needs, they take that society over completely really quickly. There's a series of experiments thought experiments in game theory, hawk-dove games, where like the doves are these endlessly forgiving, peace-minding, non-violent creatures, and hawks are these like relentlessly selfish predators. And there's a third species that I forget what they called them, but basically they're forgiving to doves and they're combative against hawks. So they pick, am I dealing with a dove or am I dealing with a hawk? And in populations where you only have doves and hawks, the hawks take over the doves and basically die out because it's all out war, that peters out. And if you have all doves and you introduce like enough hawks to reproduce at all, it immediately just annihilates everything. The only way you get a stable population is if there are enough of a species that retaliate against hawks. And so, like at a very abstract level, that's like an indication that to have a society, there is a real need for something like retributive justice or punitive justice. Otherwise, there's a tiny percent of people who have their compassion module in their brain broken and they just take advantage can destroy the entire society. It's like too fragile, doesn't work. And yeah, I take like the work of social scientists, even though they have lots of flaws and there's massive oversimplifications in there. The experiments are almost impossible to do, but I take that kind of more seriously than this like religious hopeful thing that we can, like it's possible for everyone to just be compassionate. And so why don't we do that thing? Let's go for that.
Yeah, but hard to impose. Be compassionate, especially on the hawks.
Be compassionate, or else I'm going to take you out.
I'll get the one compassionate hawk to get on you.
Yeah. So Rosenberg's game is, for the hawks, enough empathy will turn them into doves. For all hawks, every time enough empathy turns them into a dove, and I just don't think that's true. But that's his view of life.
I was going to say, it's almost like he's saying the only hawks that exist have fooled themselves into being hawks. They're really doves deep inside.
The doves who haven't had enough empathy, yeah. We just, with enough empathy, we'll turn it back into doves. That's his view on human nature.
I mean, I don't know that he's trying to say that it would really work, but just to say, here's an approach for people who are maybe borderline hawks. They can maybe back it down and get back into that more controlled category if we're going to split on these three things. But it's interesting that the game theoretics work out that way. I mean, it seems sort of, when you frame it that way, that seems straightforward.
Yeah, so then for the subset, which usually, like, I think among people, the experiments have been shown, like, it is only a subset of people who will make sacrifices to themselves to punish someone who violated a third party. Like, so as a witness, see injustice and then derive enough pleasure from punishing the perpetrator that they'll be willing to pay a price in order to punish the perpetrator. And like, I forget the numbers, but make a number. Say 30% of people enjoy justice enough that they will pay to punish.
There's nobody is a dove, a hawk, or the hybrid. Like, those are way too simple. I mean, it's just a model, but people have all sorts of weird motivations, like white knighting and stuff, where they might just be doing that for the white knight points. Yeah,
so that's one hypothesis. So how that would be tested is to check if they would still pay it, even if it was anonymous. No one would ever found out they paid to have the perpetrator punished.
Yeah,
and I believe that kind of controls have actually been done. So I'm not, I won't be able to cite the studies, but like the takeaway that I remembered from reading them is that, like, some people are intrinsically motivated to punish wrongdoers. Like, they have a need, the way Rosenberg uses it, to punish.
The thought that
you're getting crackly on us.
Tragedy that deteriorates the overall benefit to society.
All I heard from that is tragedy of the, and then deteriorates the overall wealth of the society.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I'm back then. It's basically those vigilantes are acting as policemen for the tragedy of the commons, where they're seeing that basically, like, the narcissists, the hawks, are preying on the commons of the society, and in order to preserve society, they're acting in society's behalf, even though they're not duly authorized, say, by the government, because oftentimes the government's going to be controlled by the hawks. And that's sort of what I see you're hitting on to, again, from a different economic, political level sort of thing. That's where I see that connecting Nerdulian.
Nerdulian. Yeah, so to try to get back to the tragedy that sometimes can happen is you can have, so for people who are intrinsically motivated to punish, it's quite crucial that need is channeled in a healthy way. And so for them, distinguishing between, is a person deserving of punishment or not deserving from punishment, crucially important. And so unhelpful from Rosenberg is basically, no one ever deserves any punishment. Get that out of your head entirely. Not helpful for people who have a need to punish, and for evolutionary reasonable reasons have that need. And then what can happen is you can have this person born with a need to punish, and then also through life cultivate a habit of self-deception, where they're never in need of punishment and it's always other people who are in need of punishment. And so they find ways to frame things so that other people are deserving of punishment, and they find a way to meet their need for punishment in ways that is not aligned with, say, the needs of society or the needs of their families or friends or other people's needs. It's like purely based on delusion, and it's not always purely based on delusion, but even for people who it's not all of the time a problem that they're just looking for people to punish, it can be that at times when they do feel a need to punish, they may just be mistaken about the desert of someone. Rosenberg says that they're always mistaken. I think sometimes it makes sense to talk about desert.
Well, again, speaking of projections, or let me put in a projection in here, a need to punish sometimes is a need to restore justice. And so they would project whoever they want to restore justice to, sorry, bad English. And then they would, let's say, finance justice somewhere else and feel like satisfaction a little bit of the void of the actual need which they have restored justice about something else. Yeah. So I don't think people have the need for punishment, but they do have a need to restore justice. And those are conflated. Just a thought.
I think both. I think both.
You think two different things there? I guess one of those two is very foreign to me, so have a harder time accepting the idea of somebody having a need for vengeance. I think I have a connotation with need that it's justified. Maybe that's it's because that word. But like if it's a justified need for vengeance, then he's like, but it's not justified. I'm like, well, don't call it a need then. Anyway, but the idea that somebody might feel drawn to say, no, I have to restore justice, and the way to restore justice is the bad people must be punished. And that feels like, okay, somebody could frame that as something that they feel very drawn to, feel a need for, like they have to step up. And so in that sense, I don't know if it has to be a call for vengeance exactly, but let's say a call to some action on your part. Just to point at it and go, it's wrong. It just never seems like enough. Twitter is not enough. Quote me on that.
I was going to say, some of it for me, it's almost like it's the difference between addressing the problem in the sense of so it doesn't happen anymore versus an inherent, the retribution's more of a, this person needs to get back what they did. And it's like I said, more from us. It's like if they hurt somebody, they need to be hurt back. Not that we necessarily need to find ways to prevent that hurt from happening going forward. It's sort of almost an equal opposite reaction for the vengeance retribution thing. And the other one's more of like a societal field approach. It's sort of a general feel I'm getting there. Going to tag on that.
I think there's a lot of legitimacy in some of this, in the sense of if somebody does something and there is no fallout from it, then that is the group saying, oh, that's all right. We're good with that. And then you have, let us say, injustice grow, because now people are like, oh, I guess you can just go around smacking people upside the head whenever you disagree with them, because that's what people do and there's no repercussions. So I guess that's what we've all agreed to. So the idea of you saying, no, there has to be some linkage to, it has to matter. Justice has to be kept by the group, otherwise it will fall apart.
I actually trying to say, to go back to culture of outrage.
Okay.
So in the culture of milking the outrage, there would be a person with a bell, like I got hurt. I'm the underdog here, and I got hurt by them, bad people. Please restore the justice, avenge me, basically.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, is it appealing to other people needs to be a hero? Or is it appealing to the here is injustice being done, restore it? Like, which one is that? I do believe it might be both as well, because
I think it is, but I think it's largely delusional, because like in that Twitter outrage space, I'll use as an example, or just social media more broadly, you're not really having the effect you think you're having. If you send people death threats and think, oh, well, see, that's not fixing it. And that's not it's not a non-violent communication. So misplaced and delusional. But I think that they think that they're acting that way. Like they're acting out of that thought that they are doing the right thing, defending the right people, acting against injustice, some hero-ness to it too. They could be white knighting, a lot of stuff. But if you've misframed the situation and made enemies of your non-enemies, then you're tilting at windmills.
I want to share like a really cute personal story. So at the jiu-jitsu club, there's several guys who are like dozens of kilograms heavier than me. So like upwards of 50 pounds heavier than me, much stronger than me, have been doing jiu-jitsu longer than me. If they're ever angry at me and we have a real fight, I'm completely screwed, right? And I once found one of these guys isn't just big and strong, he's a little round too. So I found a very funny picture that just reminded enough of him that it would be totally hilarious on the jiu-jitsu group chat to post it and say, it reminds me of that guy.
Yeah.
Way bigger, scary dude than me, like a humiliating little picture. Everybody laugh at him at his expense.
Better hope he takes it well.
And then a week later, when we have the same class at the same time, my coach just laughs at me and says, Francois, tonight you can roll with Mr. Big Bones over there.
Mm-hmm.
And we had two laughs. The first time we laughed when I put a humiliating picture of him. Everybody laughed at him. Second time we laughed was when he took revenge on me the week after.
Trivially put you in some sort of dreadful lock or something.
Yes, made my life hell, and that was all great.
Justice was restored.
Shut out, and there will be a third revenge when he will see that thing. Shut out, Mr. Big Bone. We all laughed at you.
I was going to bring up one of where I think a lot of the outrage culture gets its power from, that I'm not sure non-Americans understand, and that's the concept of protected class within America. And that came about with the whole racial injustice and things like that, but it basically eliminated a lot of the concept of equal under the law, and it gave a protected class extra privileges that normal citizens don't have. And if you could qualify as a protected class, that you were oppressed or something, you could now claim all of these extra benefits from the government and get extra privileges and things like that. And that's where a lot of what I see the intersectionality and some of what the outrage culture is being based off of is being driven from that as a political power. Going to tag on that and see what you guys think.
I was going to say that my reaction to a lot of that is that they may think that they're pointing at justice in a lot of cases, but when I look at those sort of rules, I think that's unjust. Like the law, when they will write some privilege in there for whatever group, I immediately, maybe it's my autistic nature, I just go, that's wrong. But they're so far in my experience, never in a place to hear that. They don't want to hear that. Nobody involved wants to hear that. They just go, you're far right or whatever. And so, but I'm still acting out of this need for justice, because I'm like, no, it's wrong. It is, I want you to understand that I want you to understand that you're wrong. That's my frustration there. I try not to get angry at the people, but like that level of frustration that I feel, I think comes from some sort of an abstract need of saying, no, that is not good thinking, to think, oh, everyone's equal under the law, good. Everyone's equal to law, but we got to make some special rules, bad. And it's hard to find agreement on that point.
It's funny when people disagree with you, they can just label you left or right.
Yeah, I don't
And
buy
that's
the labels,
it. They're like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like a cop out.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the identitarianness of any sort is, you can't say like, all Hispanic people are like this. Wrong. Skin color people are like this. No. Indigenous people are like that. No. But it is certainly a massive part of our culture today that those are supposedly the right things to think in a lot of people's heads.
What
I
I
don't know if you
found
guys
is
know
that's
Billboard
directly
Chris, but he encountered, I'm sorry. Billboard
I was going to say
Chris.
that's directly connected to critical theory. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, Algernon.
I was going to bring it back to violence, or try to anyway. There's a guy named Billboard Chris who's gone around holding up very controversial signs like "No kid is trans," and he's basically trying to protect children from that, let's say, that ideology. And his approach is to just go places with sandwich boards. He tried to publish stuff and then got all blocked. He's from Canada, and so he's just gone around wearing a sandwich board sign, and then he's getting punched and beat up and all sorts of stuff. And it's just remarkable to me. I mean, and this is where people who are doing that think, I'm sure, that they are, they've gone beyond nonviolent communication to fists, but they think they're justified. They think that they are the correct, the good guys in that situation. I couldn't disagree with them more.
I was going to say that totally leads into the point that I was going to make, and that's that the other key component of it that's been the rise in university system all is the use of critical theory in so many ways to analyze things. And that essentially divides everything into two groups, the oppressed and the oppressor. And the goal is to flip, if you're the oppressed, you want to flip it and become the oppressor. And the first time I heard that explained to me, it's like, I don't want either of those. I don't want to oppress anybody, and I don't want to be oppressed. And I realized essentially what it does is it traps in the Hegelian dialectic into the thesis, antithesis, and forever denies the synthesis which solves the problem. It's basically divide and conquer formalized. Tagging on that.
I'm leaving more room for Nadalian.
I think we can maybe go on to the next slide.
Hold on. There is a practice here. And the practice is when you are angry, slow down. It's one of those practices that Graham pointed out. Slow down. I'm angry because they identified, and then replace it with I'm angry because I need something else, and to focus on the need. It's like basically diffusing. And now I will go to the next slide.
I was going to say on that one, just the switch, however, whatever the words are, but when you're changing it from I'm angry because of something that somebody did that's outside of me, you don't have a lot of agency. But if you're saying I'm because of what I'm feeling or what I need or anything that's within the I, you have agency over that, some, at least arguably. And so just that reframing is, I think, the key useful point. New slide.
New slide. New slide just has a bunch of slogans for us to talk about the material we just went through. Anger co-opts our energy by diverting it toward punitive actions. Yes, so we basically, instead of doing the thing we want to do, we focus on punishing others. When we become aware of our needs, anger gives way to life-serving feelings. I'm not sure what that means. And the last one, violence comes from the belief that other people cause our pain, therefore deserve the punishment. It's like that thing we talked about, restoring justice. Oh my God. Literally something happened.
Yeah.
Somebody caused pain.
I think that's the quote where like the direct quote is all violence derives from that, and that actually contradicts.
Yes, I edited
Right.
for your sake.
Thank you very much. But it contradicts something interesting that was written in the preface to the book. I think it was either Gandhi's son or his grandson, where he talked about it was his grandson, about his father teaching that there's many kinds of violences and people are confused about violences, but that one of the most pernicious forms of violence is neglect. And it's a passive aggressive kind of violence. And neglect doesn't necessarily happen because people want to punish. It could just happen because people are too lazy or too selfish to give a damn about others.
The generalization of, I mean, I think he's in this chapter anyway, very focused on the physical violence, although he did say physical and mental.
I mean, so the kind of neglect that the British government doled out to the Indians that starved millions of people has this physical component of millions of people being dead, but they weren't killed by guns or whatever. They were just, their needs were not tended. Their needs to eat, like their actual needs, like without which they die, were not met because the British government had other priorities. And so it wasn't to punish them. It wasn't out of a desire to get revenge against the Indians. It was just other priorities are more important than your need to live.
Shut out.
What was that?
Both Indian.
I was raised with a little bit of hatred for the British government because my forefathers have fought a bitter war, like 2 Boer wars against the British. So that one's an example that easily comes to mind because of some childhood indoctrination. I'm very sorry. I really like British people. I love you. Some funny TV shows and your
Benny Hill.
great ways,
we can't talk about that.
and your rock music.
She knows. I think if you show that to some millennials, they will actually explode. But
I think the TikTok music, that's show.
The idea of neglect, I don't know if neglect, so many times these words get smudged. I don't know if neglect is violence per se. I'm uncomfortable combining those. I mean, it's not nice. And it does do damage. So
not nice to starve people to death.
Can lead to damage.
That's
yeah.
Come on, guys.
But I can bring it right to the current day U.S. So you beat down the British. I want to beat on the U.S. Here in the U.S., we neglect the children. We go and the example I'll give is internet pornography. Internet pornography is just click and there's all kinds of stuff coming through your internet, and they could block that for children. They could put up a paywall or whatever that would stop most of it. And I'm sure the creative ones will find it, but it'll generally slow it down. And it's the right mode because you shouldn't be putting that in front of young eyes. But we just neglect it. We're just like, oh yeah, it's hard. And I don't know why we do it. I don't know why we don't care, but man, we just completely neglect that. And I see that as violence toward the next generation, that we're like, yeah, you're on your own. It's just out there now. Whatever that does to your mind at 10 years old, I guess it'll be okay. That just strikes me as like unbelievable that we continue that way. Unbelievable.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Kara.
No, Graham, you go.
I was going to say, I agree with you 100% there. Where I look at it is outside of basically taking away unlimited screen access from all kids. I don't know how you do that. And I don't know how you take cell phones away from kids these days. So,
Oh yeah, I have some ideas, but no, I don't even think you have to do an all or nothing. You just do credit card thing. Just say like all, or even the domain thing. We just say put all porn has to be within a .xxx domain or whatever. Make up a new domain, whatever. I don't know, but you could separate it. It's totally a technically solvable problem, but there's no push from society and or people who can make rules. I don't know. They used to call them politicians or something. They're uninterested, apparently. It's not a big enough issue or something.
I hear what you're saying. I'm going more with I think that the screen access and having total control over that for kids when they were younger. See, like I said, I see that as a definite solution. I'm just not sure anything short of that is. I'm not sure anything short of that is much more than a road bump slowing down and limiting the number of kids. All of which I approve of, but it's not the same as a solution to me.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I guess if we were trying solutions and they were failing, I would be like, we need to try this or try that. But we're not even trying. We've just gone like, oh, hard problem. Plus it gets in the way of profits. Don't care. They'll be fine. Unreal.
You hit the big number there, follow the money.
Profit, right. Yeah, when I found out that Disney was a major investor in Pornhub, it shifted my view of the world. They divested later. They put some more shell corporations in the way. They're like, oops, it was directly evident that we own Pornhub. That wasn't supposed to be evident.
Well, I won't say anything about the Musketeers being child exploitation, but I happen to live in Orlando.
The actual Musketeers?
Or? Oh, you live in Orlando? I used to live in Kissimmee.
So you know all about the mouse and exactly what the Reedy Creek Development District is.
Yes, I do. Well, I don't know what your view of it is, but
kingdom.
Yeah.
I'm just like giving shout out to those
guys. Getting back to Rosenberg. Yeah, getting back to Rosenberg, what I'm seeing him saying is basically the first one's a re-encapsulation of don't cry over spilt milk. Put your effort into cleaning up the milk and going forward.
Which is good.
And the second one is more of the idea of if you're aware of your needs, that anger gives way, and what the anger is going to produce is, once you examine it, more of a righteous need, a need that's actually legitimately based, and which is going to be life-serving, more of a self-care sort of one. Like again, you need to get the paycheck from the boss, and those are the things I see going on there. So tag on that one. Kara can handle the new slide.
Yes. After we shut out the Orlando people, whatever crimes they did in there. It's, by the way, it's a news to me. I totally want to address the fact that Disney invested in Pornhub. Like, are they trying to, like, I'm trying to find how exactly are they branching out into market? Are they trying to sneak Mickey Mouse in the imagery or something?
No, I just think they own a lot of stuff. They have a lot of money.
Oh, okay.
That.
That's the next best.
But the idea that they are like a corporation that just cares about children is clearly not the case. You're like, they care about money.
Mm-hmm. What if they
did drop a lot of porn from Pornhub, so there's that. Anyway.
So they're fighting the good fight.
What are our 4 options when hearing a difficult
Imagine that guy who comes in like had a rough day and goes for his favorite video, and there is a Mickey Mouse video, and he's, God damn it, not those Furies. Shut out Furies. Furies?
Purists?
I don't know.
I think she's trying to say furries.
I don't know. Yes, I was trying to say
furries.
But yes,
oh man, you're gonna
nice
get the
guys.
furries again.
Yeah, I always thought they were inspired by Disney. I get a lot into trouble for that. It's just like
You should hold the
Imagine
stream.
that
Like, how
I'm
fast
like
can we get the stream
empathizing with the
down?
guy who's like trying to get his usual routine. All of it is gone, and everywhere just Disney characters. And like we are looking out for your children that they get the better content. Okay. So when we get angry, we should focus on. Oh, okay. So we can remember the reactions that usually arise, and we can identify which one of those we have. And the reactions are: we can blame others, blame ourselves, blame others, sensing our own feelings and needs, sensing feelings and needs of other people. I never do that. Like honestly, I just confused by people doing that. It's like, when you are angry, what are you doing? Are you blaming yourself? Are you blaming others? It's like, I get to focus what I need and not getting, but identifying what exactly is going on with me is hard. So this one is a difficult one for me.
I think part of that comes from these things aren't like purely causal like that. There's not one thing so often. Like, you could just be in a mood, as we say, and it could be a lot of energy that's coming up from a lot of different things. And then, one more thing happens and you lash out at it. And then you stop and you look back and you're like, why am I having this reaction? And it's complicated. You're like, oh, this happened and that happened, and then the car broke, and then this, and oh my God, and now I have a headache, and then I lashed out. You're like, so what was the cause of it? Yeah, it's not a pure chain. So to think that they are, always just dot is not quite right. But the advice to stop and examine all of that and have some space to redirect, I think, is right. And then also the energy that you would otherwise put into this punitive action. There's something about, like, there is, I'll say, energy that builds up in you in that anger moment. And the idea that you could channel it, I'll use that word, but basically redirect that energy to other things. That feels very real to me. And he says, what was it? As a previous slide, but like, into more life affirming activities, that can be one. And I think actually just going out and doing physical stuff, like if you go for a run, or if you're into that, or punching bag or something like that, that burning off of that physical energy can often help give you more space.
Yeah, so I remember when we talked about the chapter for taking responsibility for our feelings. That's the first time he mentions these four options, I think. And here a couple of places says it's very rare for people to be able to respond with option 4 when they're really angry, or when they really hurt, like really scared, really hurt, really sad, or really angry. Very difficult to sense the needs of the other people, especially if they're perceived as the source of the hurt, or the danger, or the violation, or whatever. But it can be trained, and he advises that often, in order to be able to sense the other's needs, we need for ourselves a bunch of empathy first. So sometimes we can go to someone where we can get that empathy, or we can just take some time for ourselves. Or he says we can scream non-violently at the other people.
That's my punching bag. Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes, at least in that chapter, it sounds like sometimes, like, he did give an example of when he was angry. So he was in a mood for reasons, and there was a fight at home when he got home, and he yelled at his kids, and he said, well, it was non-violent. Yeah. He's explained why he's yelling was non-violent.
That's not that is not non-violent in his own language to direct that at kids. Now, if he just goes in the other room and yells, maybe.
No, he yelled at them.
Yeah, so
he's had a really rough day and he just not have energy for this. Like that, something like that. But he says that applies for other people too. So if we want them to sense our feelings and needs, they're, first of all, unlikely to be able to do that. And second of all, very unlikely if they don't have enough empathy first. But so we'll get there, I guess, soon. But yeah, like being able to sense the feelings and needs of others often require that we feel sufficiently secure and heard and understood ourselves, so that we're not panicky about our own needs going unmet in the future. So like people, if they're obsessed, no, I have needs that I'm scared will not be met, it becomes very difficult to give a damn about anyone else's needs. Because like these very pressing things that, like, if I don't give this attention, disaster will happen, and it's very difficult to get past that. But when we feel that our grown-ups have heard that we've had these needs, and we feel secure that these things will be tended to when the time is right and in an appropriate manner, that we can relax about it. Okay, that's stuff I don't have to worry about, and then maybe have some mental space to think about, oh, you're also a person who has needs. What are your needs?
I think just asking the other person that question could, open up a lot of conversation if you could do that with them. Hard to do in the fight. This is where alcohol is useful.
Alcohol and the evergreen line. What is it like to be you right now?
Yeah, we're like promoting alcohol here. Like awesome.
What needs and feelings are you sensing in yourself and in others? So often people misimpute what is going on in the other, that whenever I see advice to try to understand what's going on in the other, if it doesn't involve like asking them, it's fraught. Because so often people are just like, oh, I know why they said that. You're like, no, you don't. You absolutely do. You hardly know why you said something. You certainly don't know why someone else said something. You can ask them and they may not know, but at least now you're on a path of partial communication. You could maybe figure it out. But when people just impute, they said this, so therefore that meant this, that's where they're coming from. It's so often wrong.
I had this problem, like where I would try to figure out what is happening in me, and I'm trying to understand why I'm doing things, why I'm feeling things, what's wrong. And then the other person who just knows everything would be like, what's happening to you is, that's what's happening to you. What you need to do is, and so, no,
better.
You are convincing me. Stop saying, no, I see it from the outside, so I have my duty to enlighten you, to help you. I want to help you. And so what you're feeling is what you need to do. And no, that sounds very wrong. I'm still figuring out what's happening to me, but like whatever you say sounds very wrong. And like that, the thing is, quick opinions and judgments of others kind of disturb your way of thinking. And especially in me, because I everything is driven by emotion a lot of times. And when there is emotion, I can't even notice if I'm blaming others, if I'm able to sense my own feelings and needs. I like how Nerdalin is typing furiously.
Taking notes.
Yes, now I have to type back.
That's poor live stream behavior.
No, it's nice. That's exactly what Twitch quality is about. I'm so happy
I was going to pick up on my take at Rosenberg here, and he pretty much shows with my autism, I do everything ass backwards from his point of view, because he leaves off words here like think and decide. And that's what that's my primary focus is I don't go through any of these 4 steps. It's like I start with number 5, which is examine the cause and effect and figure out what actually happened. It's only then I can start back propagating to figure out, okay, whose needs and feelings we're factoring in. And once I figure out all of that one, it's like, well, I'm only going to accept blame for the things I actually caused.
Mm.
If I didn't cause it, I'm not going to accept blame for it. So it's only when I'm not going to blame somebody else if they didn't cause it. Sometimes things are just unfortunate situations and nobody's to blame. So it's like I often, once I start with the cause and effect and build my way upwards, a lot of times I don't end up blaming anybody. And I don't understand that this initial reaction that apparently so many, again, more neurotypicals have, of the reaction of either blaming themselves or blaming the other person, is like knee-jerk reflexes without cognition. Going to tag on that one.
Yeah, so I think this is probably true for autistic people also. When emotions run high, like just the mind becomes more reactive and less reflective.
Mm.
And so one of the really good pieces of practical advice that I found lots of use for, and I've seen it put to good use by many people, is like when emotions start running high, to slow things down. And like I like a little analogy. I'm not sure exactly how much this analogy holds up in the actual neuroscience, but this is how I think about it, and it's how it like experientially feels for me. It's like when if my brain had a clock speed, it's as if emotions reduce that clock speed like dramatically. And so I can still do the same computations, but they take a longer time. And if I act in the same amount of time, actually typically like strong emotions like anger and fear would make me want, well, anger specifically will make me want to act more urgently, so act faster.
Mm.
And so the combination of like my brain running at lower clock cycles and acting faster just means the actions that get taken are much less considered than if I wasn't upset. Than if I wasn't upset. So I would be thinking faster and also acting slower if I wasn't upset than when I'm upset. But it is a thing that can be trained as an instinctive response to whenever emotions run high, just slow it down. Just take an extra minute before responding. And it can be very awkward, and that minute can be just very uncomfortable and tense, but a lot of experience. Sitting in rooms just angry and not saying anything. It's awful, but it's better than saying 100 stupid like angry tension is. I think it's less awful than saying 100 really dumb things, ill-considered things. You say one thing that's decently considered in that minute, rather than too many things.
Moving on. Judgments of others contributes to self-fulfilling prophecies. Judgments of others contributes to self-fulfilling prophecies. Yeah, so that idea when we would tell another person what we are afraid of, and so we will tell exactly what we are afraid of in them, people feel judged, and they will sometimes kind of act rebelliously by like, well, let me show you the worst of it. It's that sort of thing. It's like retribution for judging, for being judged or being suspected of bad, malicious behavior or something. And so I think he kind of talked about his kid, seeing a kid taking like 50 cents. And like, I was like, oh my God, just put another 50 cents. Why you have to confront a child? Just let the child go through a phase. You're a psychologist, you know there is like, what? And then... and then also...
Hope your kids aren't listening.
I mean, my kids... like, the thing is... until you actually have a moral core built in and the sense of right and wrong, I know it's nice to talk to your kid and kind of direct them. But if you do it in a bad way, you will actually receive the opposite. Because again,
This is that self-fulfilling prophecy thing, right? If you treat them like a little criminal, they become little criminals. Something like
something like that, or like kids actually don't know. Very often they discover the world and that's what I am. I just saw this 50 cent unattended and I decided to take it. Like, who the fuck would unattend 50 cents? That's exactly how kids think. And and then they would take it. And then somebody comes, you did a bad thing. And the kid is like, am I bad? Was this bad? Seeing unattended 50 cents, like, sounds stupid. Yeah. Like, there are 50 cents. Like, a kid actually receives, the kid is always in observation mode. Yeah. Reflection, not a part of it.
It's a great idea. I like this because so what you do is the kid takes the 50 cents and instead of having this angry response or going through these 4 things, what you do is you wait until they go to sleep. And then you go into their room at night and you find where they put the 50 cents and you take it. And then the next morning at breakfast, you have 50 cents at the table and you're just playing with it. You get the 2 coins and they're like, hey, where'd you get the 50 cents? And you're like, I just found it in your room. And they're like, what? And you're like, just find money, man. This is how this works, apparently. And then you can have a discussion. Creative,
that's excellent.
Creative parenting. There you go.
I love it.
Communication.
Oh my God.
Might not work in all cases, but for the 50 cents case, deal it back.
No, but it's excellent. I
think there's a lot of teaching that goes like that, especially with little kids, or like they take a toy from somebody and then it upsets the other kid. And so you maybe encourage, I had a friend who worked at a kindergarten and you could encourage another kid to like go take their toy and then there's a lesson to be had. Anyway, might be a bad parent.
I was going to say, my approach was always you double the penalty in reverse. It's like if they take the 50 cents, they lose $1 off the allowance.
Oh, see, there's ramifications. But you're teaching them like you don't take other people's money, you don't take other people's things, and that's a good lesson.
Or it has a negative impact on you. Exactly.
Yeah. You don't want them to take your things. We respect each other's stuff. If we break somebody else's stuff, we say, I broke it. All those lessons that have to be done.
And that I feel that approach is you're doing it as an explanation of justice as opposed to these are the rules of the game and this is the punishment.
Doubling it, man, that's harsh, Graham.
I want to tell how my mom once taught me how it is bad to lie. And so early morning, I was about like 6. I come out of my sleeping room and my mom comes to me all caring and nice and kind, and she said, "Hi, did you feel really, really bad last night? Did you feel like was there something wrong with you?" And I was like, I don't remember, but I might have felt bad because I kind of seen her caring and I decided to play into it to see because I'm playful and was like, yeah, let's see where it's going. Yes. So I'd be like, yes, I felt really bad. And she takes me kindly by the hand. We go into the kitchen and there is vomit on the floor. And she's like, well, clean it up now. It was not mine. It was cat's vomit. And she knew it was a cat.
She tricked you into it?
Yes.
This was the lesson? It's very Russian.
Yes. Well, I never, ever afterwards, I mean, if she would ask me, did you feel bad? I was, no, go clean the vomit yourself.
Wow.
Shut out my mom. She's a big fan. Watch.
I don't feel bad about my 50 cent thing at all now, given these 2 responses.
I never do it to people. Oh, let's see what the comments say. How much compassion and empathy I received for that.
Oh no,
I'm
comments.
Okay,
People going to judge us? Remember, it only contributes to self-fulfilling prophecies. Go ahead.
Judge yourself. Okay, then some people using judgments of others to intimidate other people into meeting their needs. So as a manipulation technique. And knowing that, because we all know that people actually go and they put you down so that they will kind of force you into meeting their needs. But you owe me, like, or something like this, phrases like that. And then they were like, but you owe me for this and this reason. And then the person was like, well, I actually don't owe you, but you feel like, you obviously feel like I owe you. So there must be something, like there is this doubt. And anger can arise from that as well. And we should also remember that when we judge others, others may perceive it because they had been used and manipulated in the past. They will react to anger at our, let's say, blaming them, and none of us will get our needs met. So in order to get the best, let's say, out of life, we should withhold and maybe try to compare the needs. Let's say. What do you guys think?
I feel uncomfortable with comparing needs in that case. It feels like the only thing you can do is try to, I'll say control, but I know that word's kind of not a good fit here. Look at where your anger is arising and have agency about it using all these different methods, the space and the looking at your root causes and whatnot. And you can hope that the other people do that too, but that's, that's a long road. You could at least model the behavior for other people. I've seen that work where you have an angry person confront somebody who just does not come back with the anger. And then it tends to, if they're good at it, tends to dissolve the situation a little bit or soften it, diffuse.
Makes sense. I think the word that I use instead of control for that situation is influence. Because it's like the only thing I can control is really my actions and my choices, and I can influence other people. And the idea of control outside of yourself is an illusion. And one of the things that I pick up from Rosenberg is he's talking about the emotional level, which is a shaming and blaming. And he's linking judgments to inherently shaming and blaming the other person to doing things for you. And it seems like what he's trying to do is almost eliminate all shame and blame. And unfortunately, that is a social control that exists. It's not, as Nodrik would say, it's an evolutionary conserved, part of humanity. So it has a purpose. And, I recognize what Rosenberg's doing. Don't know if there's necessarily a lot of wisdom in following that all the way to the end of the trail. Tagging on that.
Yeah, there's also like a possible way to respond to say a person communicating their needs aren't being met, and the other person can respond, "Oh, are you shaming and blaming me now?" Like, no matter how you express that, like, no, I have these needs that if they're not met, I'm out. Oh, so you're threatening to leave now? Like, no, just actually, I need this, and if I don't get it, from you, I will have to go elsewhere. That's just how this works out. And then never trusting that those needs are legitimate. Like, always being suspicious that it's just a manipulation game. There's no. I guess I'm a little worried that the fact is sometimes people use shame and blame in order to manipulate others. And that seems unwise and tragic and like problematic in all kinds of ways. But then once one gets at a certain level of suspicious, every request can seem manipulative. Just
Yeah.
Every attempt to relate in a way that's not you're all on your own and I'm all on my own, and maybe we do all on our own in the same room, but that's as far as it goes. Like any attempt to just make contact with another human being and do things together and do things for each other can be perceived as a manipulative tactic and be guarded against and kicked against. So that's what I'm thinking about. I'll tag out.
Trust comes to mind. So trusting that another person has a good intention is hard. Because like we are creatures of pattern recognition. We tend to learn from the past. We tend to kind of see similarities so that we can avoid mistakes in the future. And sometimes it translates onto people, onto other new people who are completely different. So basically we will project our past experiences onto them. And that can contribute to anger quite a lot. So I will get a new slide. It will be a last slide.
12 more slides. Here we go.
Yeah, we are closing up.
6 hours.
We are narrowing actually the second hour, the end of the second hour. We go slightly above 2 hours mark. So here is finally another practice, his final practice, which is what I call to diffuse the situation. Steps to expressing anger. Steps to, and a really useful one, stop, breathe. Identify our judgmental thoughts. Connect with our needs. You can use empathy for that. Express our feelings and unmet needs. So verbally express it, I guess, or in writing. So what do you guys think about that practice?
I think, and going back to what you were saying before, and then the latter part of that, offering empathy first, the idea that by doing that, by offering empathy first and listening to the other person and coming at them from that perspective of empathy is how you can build some trust. And so you can see in his exchanges with some, like the prisoner case, where he's very respectful and mostly asking questions as opposed to declaring what's in their head, that kind of thing, which is, trying to empathize with their perspective. And I think that builds the trust that you can then have some back and forth. And then that makes it a little more likely that you could probably get away with some of number 4. But until you have that basis for trust established, I could see number 4 going quite wrong. In part because if you don't trust the other person and they just say like, oh, I've thought about my unmet needs and here they are and you need to respect them. Super open to manipulation. They just sort of declare what you need to do to make them feel better. So that's not an authentic use of number 4. But anyway, I like the 4 steps. I think that'll get you there. I'm not sure about the word connect.
Yeah.
Tag.
Yeah, rather than connect, I do think actually understand is a good word. Rosenberg does use the word empathy instead of the word understanding for reasons I'm not entirely sure about why. In a lot of scientific work, empathy is the mirroring of emotions, of feeling the same emotion as someone else, which is not the way Rosenberg uses it at all. He means understanding a person's experience in terms of what they're feeling, what they're needing, what they're observing, like really taking a person's perspective into account without necessarily feeling the same. So understanding what they're about. But yeah, when he says connect to our needs, I think he means with the same kind of understanding, although we have more intimate contact with our own experience, like what it actually feels like to be us feeling angry or be us feeling sad. And but then also try to understand. So that's what it feels like in the body, and but what does this mean for what about, like, how does it relate to my needs and my observations and my expectations and my desires and that kind of thing? How does it all fit together? Like, it's almost really answering, like, who am I in this story that's playing out? The situation is a kind of story, and I'm a kind of character. What kind of character am I? What is the experience like of being this character in this kind of story? Although, like, reality is complicated enough, and our ability to tell stories is limited enough that for any given situation we could tell very many different, highly plausible stories that are diverge quite sharply from each other by highlighting different things and by leaving out different things from the summary.
I was going to add a complete
definitely
aside, but I'm not going to do it. Graham?
I was going to sit there and say, as a writer, I can definitely sign off on that different ones. One of the things that I like to do as a writing exercise is write the same sequence of events from the different characters' points of view, like the hero versus the villain, bystander sort of thing. It's interesting stuff. I really actually, this is one of the times I got to sit here and take my head off to Rosenberg, because he used a word that I haven't heard him use before so much, and that's judgmental. Because I see a big difference between being judgmental and judging. Because you need to judge in order to learn the cause and effect. The judgmental is that emotional level thing where you're doing the shame and blame.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's you can't learn if you can't do judging. And that's some of where I think Nodalian's having some issues with him, where he's not using understanding, because he's really avoiding talking about thinking. He very rarely uses that word that I encountered him using that word in this process. It's very much in the just sticking on that emotional plane. And, I appreciated his use of the word judgmental there, because he's definitely saying that, because I agree with him 100%, you need to strip away those emotional judgments when you're going to cause and effect. And they do no good if you're doing the blaming, as you're trying to figure out what actually happened. And as far as trust goes, you need to have a circuit, extend a little trust, have it fulfilled so you can extend more next time. And in the sense of trust is earned, which is why, especially as an autistic and having suffered from the narcissistic abuse, anybody who's demanding that I trust them pretty much has almost immediately disqualified themselves from receiving trust. Tag.
I appreciate the line that he said, offering empathy first, I think is his answer to that, where he's like, you offer that first fig leaf, and then hopefully then they can respond with something that's a little more open, and then you can continue this and then build up that trust, but with not demanding it. And so his thing of offering it first, I think, is significant there. And appreciate your distinction of judgmental thoughts there. Like, discernment is necessary. Like, you're looking at it, you're discerning that there is some judgment there, but you're not attached to that judgment, kind of thing. Like, you're willing to be wrong. That's what it seems to me. I think that was what you were pointing at.
Yeah. I think we will revolt against coercion, against anything, like when somebody will offer for us the explanation. If we did not ask for it, we will revolt against it. And so that word offering something means a lot. Somehow offering. there is this phrases, the more we hear them out, the more they will hear us. It's kind of this reciprocal conversation. Again, so it's, I mean, it's implied. Sometimes it doesn't happen this way. Sometimes the more we hear them, they will just like, it will end there. So after that, we should come with empathy, I guess. And basically, as everything, we need to take our time and practice. This way of thinking is new, and it does take time. When I'm emotional, I need to calm down first before I will understand. Like emotional would make me react faster, way faster. I would not understand the situation. I would react and probably would do things worse. And so that time is important. Hearing other people out is important. I mean,
I think when you're super emotionally activated, if say you get defensive, if you feel like you're being attacked, then the need to feel to respond to that attack, to defend yourself or even go on the offense, feels like it has to happen really fast now. Otherwise it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't stop it unless I react now. And I could see that very natural reaction to feeling of being attacked, being at odds with this approach. Like you've got to practice that and go like, oh, here it comes. Incoming emotional wave. Let me take a moment. I still want to reserve the right to yell, by the way. I was hoping that our conversation would go there, but the conversation didn't. Like, I think there's a useful space for anger.
For yelling? Yeah. Even Rosenberg says you could yell, as long as you yell non-violently. Scream even.
No.
Non-violently.
Well, I guess, I mean, if you feel very strongly about something, I've noticed in some chat, Twitter spaces recently, somebody will go on a little rant and then they almost inevitably apologize. Like, oh yeah, I apologize, I was on a rant. And everyone in the room, I know myself, you generally feels like, no, it's good. Like just listening to you rant felt good. It was like hearing the rant in my own head. It felt a little releasing there. I guess you don't want all rant, but there's something about living it through someone else's rant that felt useful. Maybe I'm deluded.
like a proxy?
Yeah, it was a little bit, it felt like you ranting. You're like, somebody had to rant. Oh my God, and then you like it, tweet it, you retweet it or whatever. But sometimes the rant feels right. You're like, no, that's the level of emotion that should be present on this topic. That kind of thing.
That made me
I
think
would say
about
there
the
you're
need.
talking.
Go ahead,
Graham?
Graham.
Go ahead, Cara.
Okay. That made me think the need to hear somebody rant. I was like, how about secondhand embarrassment? Because there is a lot of content like that. For example, there was this absolutely amazing TV show called Peep Show, British TV show. And like that entire TV show, I felt just embarrassed so much for the people. Like I'm not in the show, but just like the situations were so bizarre that embarrassment was just like, and it felt good for some reason. And that TV show was very popular.
That's why it was popular.
Yes. So I was thinking perhaps there are needs that are wake-up calls. Like I need to hear somebody express their observations, let's say their anger. And also I do believe it is connected to the need of being understood. It's like why we hear sometimes loud music that is just screaming, and then you feel, yes, that feels so good. Somebody screams my feelings right now.
Yeah, it resonates with what you're feeling somewhere, and you're like, yeah. it feels like it's, you wanted to do the rant. This is the next
Yeah.
best thing. It's rant by proxy.
It's like in between the lines, I'm projecting here, the rant says, I understand you, I'm with you, and I'm voicing your concerns as well. And you're like, yes, that's I'm not alone in it somehow.
I like
I'm
how the
still-
rooms are responding to it. Like the person does the rant and then they usually
Mhm.
apologize, which I think is fine. They apologize for
Mhm.
the rant, and then some number of people step forward and go, no, good on you. And I'm sure there's other people like, nah, he's taking it a bit too far. But anyway, it's just a healthy thing for the group, I think. Both to have the rant, apologize, to try to keep it moderated. You don't want to just have full rant all the time. I find participating in those spaces both frustrating and interesting. So far, I have not ranted myself, but someday I'm going to rant.
If it gets frustrating enough, maybe you can rant about that.
I don't know. I feel like if they really got me going, I would go on for too long. I would apologize at the end, for sure.
Like you always have that option, like there wasn't still. You can do a lot of things, but as long as you apologize later, it gives a lot of freedom sometimes.
That's true. You can say things that you might regret and then just go, all right, I may have said some things I regret in there, but some of it I really meant. You have to figure out which is which.
I was going to say some of that ranting sounds like you're tapping into some that righteous anger, where you're able to source it into that your sense of rightness. And I was going to say, I think Rosenberg would say that as long as you're screaming at your need, that's okay. Don't scream at the other person, just scream at the need instead.
Yeah. And if you've understood where it's coming from in you, and you're, I guess, ranting along those lines, as opposed to just screeching at the windmill, something outside of yourself is the cause, then it's useful.
And I'm
expressing my anger fully.
Yeah. The last one I was going to say is on Kara's talking about the TV shows, tapping into some hidden deep need in people. I really need to go back and reconsider the TV show Jackass under those terms.
I like that show.
I was thinking about that show just today in the morning, in a context like they don't make shows like that anymore.
Well, it was a show of, I guess, that need to go out and do something that could potentially kill yourself.
No, but like there was.
It's like Fight Club.
No, but in Jackass there was also an embarrassment element a lot. Like they had this episode where guys would shave their under hair and would glue it on somebody, poor douchebags, on his face, and he was like there smiling, and he was covered in that hair, and everybody was laughing at him, and I was, God damn it. And and yet, like there were those embarrassing moments. Yes, and I'm like not a guy getting a secondhand embarrassment still by that, but there was like really bad moments where the main guy, he actually never got into trouble. I forgot what his name was, an actor from Men in Black, and he did something. So he took a piece of paper and he cut himself like that with a piece of paper, and he's, here is blood. Now you all go and try to kill yourselves right in front of me. And I was like, that's unfair. That's all you did. Like, yeah, still was, that was a good show where people can do explored.
I feel like we could talk for a couple hours on just the psychology of why one would watch the show, what you're getting from it. Yeah, because I admit that I like the movies is all I watched, a couple of movies. And I don't think I would watch them again. I think it was like a one-time viewing sort of a situation, but I enjoyed the experience of it. Part of it was not knowing what was going to happen. I was just like, what are these idiots going to do now? And then they do it. You're like, oh man.
Fear Factor is another good one on that front.
Yeah.
Similar.
Similar.
I think in
it
the
worked
Fear
out well for Joe
Factor, the
Rogan.
guy was. Yes, he was on Fear Factor.
His other talents.
One of those. Yeah. In Fear Factor, they ended it, I think, because somebody had actual hypothermia, and then there was some lawsuit in there. Like this, they had the guy in a chamber, and then he went out and he actually got into hospital later on. And that was something like that. Guys, we are at the end of NVC. Anything else? We can continue in the after party. Otherwise, we will just like step on some eggshells in the outrage culture. I think we can make it.
Just trying to keep up the level of your.
Up the little the outrage. I'm trying not to. I'm actually trying to go against the milking outrage culture. I just like when I see I monetized the outrage, haha, and I'm like, God damn it, no! It's like
Jimmy Carr is monetizing outrage these days.
No, Jimmy. It's like.
I don't know that reference.
For shout out Jimmy Carr, big fan. It was his signature laughter. Okay, guys, any closing statements on NVC?
No, I'll start first. I think Rosenberg does a decent job with adding some really important tools to people's toolkits. Again, recognizing the limitations that he's dealing emotionally and in a very limited, both people committed to the NVC, but it's definitely helps explore, especially for personal growth and exploration. You can definitely find out a lot more about your own needs, even if you don't necessarily find out about other people's. So I'll tag on that.
Yeah, maybe just in summary, to repeat myself, I think in this chapter, in my head, it has like two parts. The one part is like theoretical about the nature of anger, which I didn't seem very insightful to me at all. And then the second part is like quite practical tips for how to express anger in more wholesome ways that seemed more helpful. So yeah, on a practical side, pretty good, but the theory, not impressive.
I also thought the suggestions of steps to take mostly applied, I think, in the space of people who lose their temper and express themselves in physical violence. Though it's interesting to see how this applies to other things that are, your violent, just violent tendencies, I guess. I think there's a lot more to say about anger and other ways of actually channeling it. And in this case of like having conversations with other people, he may have framed this, doing this with just one other person, I think is useful. Doing this in a group leads to all sorts of other dynamics that he didn't get into, but he may have in other chapters. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay, guys, see you in 2 weeks in the chapter 11 of Nonviolent Communication. Thank you for coming, Algernon, Nerdalion, and Graham. Thank you for all people in the comments. It was fun, a lot of fun. Prima Aprilis, go prank somebody. And bye.